Have you ever met someone so entitled, so incredibly manipulative that they thought they could literally gift you their own responsibilities and expect you to thank them for it? Well, today I'm telling you the story of my Aunt Sarah. In our family, Sarah was the queen of fake luxury and accidental drama. But she made one fatal mistake. She tried to play her games with my dad. And if there's one thing you should know about my dad, it's that he doesn't get mad, he gets even. In the most calculated, genius way possible. It all went down last Christmas. Our family has this long-standing tradition of a massive holiday dinner. Aunt Sarah showed up, as usual, uninvited but loud, bringing along her two highly untrained, aggressive dogs. These weren't just pets. They were four-legged wrecking balls. They ruined the upholstery, barked through the prayer, and left surprises on the expensive rugs. Whenever anyone complained, Sarah would just flip her hair and say, "They're my fur babies. If you have a problem with them, you clearly have a problem with me." But the real audacity happened when the party ended. As we were packing our SUV to head back to our city, a 5-hour drive away, Sarah hatched a plan. She waited until the chaos of saying goodbye peaked, and then she did the unthinkable. She sneakily loaded both of her dogs into the back of our trunk, hidden behind a mountain of suitcases. Her plan? By the time we discovered them halfway across the state, she'd have her phone off, forcing us to keep them indefinitely because she was too overwhelmed to be a pet owner anymore. She thought she was a genius. She thought she had finally offloaded her problems onto us. But she had no idea that my dad had seen her do it through the reflection of the hallway mirror. He didn't stop her. He didn't even yell. Instead, he waited until we were 2 miles down the road to pull over with a smirk that meant someone's life was about to get very complicated. He decided to send her a luxury gift in return, a gift that would eventually lead to a scream that the entire neighborhood heard. But before we get to the box, you need to understand exactly who Aunt Sarah was. To understand why my dad's revenge was so perfect, you have to understand the nightmare that is Aunt Sarah. Sarah wasn't just annoying, she was a professional victim who lived for two things: appearing wealthy and avoiding responsibility. She lived in a tiny, cluttered apartment, yet she'd spend her last dime on a designer handbag just so she could post it on Instagram. She was the kind of person who would go to a 5-star restaurant, order the most expensive steak, eat 90% of it, and then complain it was undercooked just to get it off the bill. But her biggest accessory? Her dogs. 2 high-strung, yappy golden doodles that she treated like human royalty but trained like wild animals. She claimed they were emotional support animals, but the only emotion they supported was pure, unadulterated stress. For years, she used these dogs as a weapon. If she wasn't invited to a family event, she'd claim it was pet phobia. If she stayed at your house, your carpets were guaranteed to be ruined within the hour. And if you asked her to clean up after them, she'd burst into tears, claiming her anxiety was flaring up, and that we were all bullying her. My dad, on the other hand, is a man of few words and a lot of patience. He's a retired logistics manager, someone who spends his life solving problems and making sure things get where they need to go. He had tolerated Sarah's nonsense for decades for the sake of my grandma, but I could tell he was reaching his breaking point. Over the years, Sarah had borrowed thousands of dollars she never repaid, lost family heirlooms she was supposed to keep safe, and consistently treated my mom like a personal assistant. This Christmas was supposed to be the turning point. My parents had finally set a no-pets rule for the holiday dinner because my younger brother had developed a severe allergy. Sarah knew this. She agreed to it over the phone, sounding all sweet and compliant. But the moment she rolled up to the driveway, and we heard that familiar, high-pitched barking coming from her back seat, we knew the peace treaty was officially broken. She walked in with a smirk, convinced that once she was inside, no one would have the heart to kick her or her dogs out into the cold. The dinner was a total disaster. While my brother was sneezing his eyes shut and my mom was frantically trying to keep the dogs away from the buffet, Aunt Sarah sat there, sipping wine, pretending everything was perfect. She kept making these passive-aggressive comments about how unwelcoming the house felt. By the time the clock struck 8 p.m., everyone was exhausted. We just wanted her gone. As we started loading our SUV for the long trek back home, the house was a whirlwind of saying goodbyes and grabbing last-minute leftovers. This was Sarah's moment. She volunteered to help carry the heavy suitcases to our car. At the time, we thought, wow, maybe she's actually trying to be helpful for once. Little did we know, she was performing a calculated, tactical maneuver. While my mom was distracted at the front door and I was grabbing my jacket, Sarah opened our trunk, shoved her 2 dogs into the narrow gap behind the third-row seating, and piled a bunch of blankets and coats over them to muffle any sound. She even tossed a bag of treats in there to keep them occupied. We drove off, waving goodbye to her as she stood on the porch with a look of pure, suspicious relief. For the first 45 minutes of the drive, the car was silent. We were just relieved to have survived another Christmas with her. But then, as we hit the dark, desolate stretch of the interstate, I heard it, a faint, rhythmic scratching coming from the back. Then, a muffled, high-pitched yelp. My mom froze. "Did you guys hear that?" she whispered. My dad didn't look surprised. He didn't even slam on the brakes. He slowly pulled over onto the shoulder of the highway, the hazard lights blinking against the pitch-black trees. He walked to the back of the SUV, opened the trunk, and pulled back the blankets. 2 pairs of glowing eyes stared back at us. Sarah's dogs. My mom was horrified. She started panicking about how we'd have to drive 5 hours back, missing work the next day. But my dad? He just stared at the dogs for a long minute. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and saw that Sarah had already blocked all our numbers. He looked at me and said, "She thinks she's played her last card, but she forgot who dealt the hand." That's when I knew Sarah wasn't just getting her dogs back. She was about to get a lesson she'd never forget. Most people, in that moment, would have turned the car around, driven 5 hours back, and had a screaming match on Sarah's doorstep. But my dad? He's a work smarter, not harder kind of guy. He knew a screaming match was exactly what Sarah wanted. It would make her the victim. No, he wanted something that would hit her where it hurt most, her vanity. He looked at the dogs, then at the empty road, and simply said, "We're going to a hotel. And tomorrow, we're going shopping." The next morning, we didn't go to a pet store. We went to one of the most high-end shopping districts in the city. My dad walked straight into a boutique that sells those insanely expensive, limited edition beauty hampers, the kind that cost more than a month's rent and come in these massive, velvet-lined trunks. He didn't care about the creams or the perfumes inside. He bought the largest display trunk they had, which was empty but looked like $1,000,000. It was a deep midnight blue with gold-plated latches and a silk-lined interior. To anyone looking at it, it looked like the ultimate "I'm sorry" gift. We spent the afternoon preparing the package. Dad was meticulous. He made sure the trunk was modified with hidden, discreet ventilation holes that were impossible to see from the outside, unless you were looking for them. He lined the bottom with ultra-absorbent, high-end puppy pads that smelled like expensive lavender to mask any scent. He even went to a gourmet pet bakery and bought the most aesthetic-looking dog treats to put inside, so the dogs would stay quiet and happy during the short trip. Then came the final touch. He wrapped the entire velvet trunk in premium, gold leaf wrapping paper. He tied a massive satin bow around it that was so large it practically screamed expensive. On the top, he attached a professionally printed card that read, "A special delivery for a special sister," to compensate for the stress of the holidays. He didn't use a regular courier. He called a high-end white-glove delivery service, the kind that delivers pianos and fine art, and paid them extra to ensure the parcel reached Sarah's door at exactly 6 p.m., right when she'd be hosting her post-Christmas wine night with her snobby friends. The stage was set. The bait was wrapped in gold. Now, all we had to do was wait for the explosion. By 5:30 p.m., we were parked a block away from Sarah's apartment, watching through binoculars like we were in some kind of low-budget spy movie. We knew her routine. Every year, on the day after Christmas, she hosted what she called her Elite Apers Ski Social, which was basically just an excuse for her to drink expensive wine and brag to her equally shallow friends about her latest finds. We could see the lights in her apartment glowing, and several of her friends were already arriving, dressed in faux fur and smelling of desperation. Precisely at 6 p.m., the white-gloved delivery van pulled up. 2 men in crisp, black uniforms hopped out, carrying the massive gold-wrapped velvet trunk with the kind of care usually reserved for a Ming vase. They marched up the steps and rang the bell. Through the window, we saw Sarah open the door. Her jaw literally dropped. She looked at the gold leaf paper, the massive satin bow, and the high-value stickers. We watched her sign the digital clipboard with a flourish, her face glowing with a mix of confusion and triumph. She didn't even wait for the delivery men to leave the hallway before she pulled out her phone. My dad's phone buzzed immediately. It was a notification from the family group chat, a chat she had unblocked us from just seconds ago. She had posted a photo of the giant box with the caption, "So, it turns out my brother realized he was being a bit dramatic yesterday. Look at this stunning peace offering. I guess some people finally learned the value of family and my taste." Then the live notification popped up. She was starting an Instagram Live. She wanted the whole world and her room full of friends to witness her victory over my dad. She positioned her phone on a tripod, gathered her friends in a semicircle around the box, and grabbed a pair of silver scissors. My dad leaned back in his seat, a calm smile on his face, and whispered, "Wait for it." We watched the screen as she began to slowly, dramatically cut through the satin ribbon, describing the weight and quality of the gift to her followers. She had no idea that inside that luxury velvet lining, her 2 dogs were just waking up from a nap, ready for their own big debut. The atmosphere in Sarah's living room, as seen through the Instagram Live, was electric. Her friends were oohing and ahing, some even filming on their own phones. Sarah was basking in the attention, her ego inflated to its absolute limit. "You see, girls," she chirped at the camera, "quality always recognizes quality. My brother knew he had to make a big statement to get back into my good graces." She placed her hand on the gold-plated latch of the velvet trunk, pausing for dramatic effect. "Let's see what's inside. I'm guessing it's either a vintage collection of Hermes scarves or perhaps that designer espresso machine I've been eyeing." With a triumphant flick of her wrist, she popped the latches. The sound of the metal clicking was picked up clearly on the microphone. She threw the lid open with a flourish. For exactly 2 seconds, there was total silence. Sarah stared into the box, her smile frozen like a mannequin's. Then, the silence was shattered by a frantic, high-pitched double bark that echoed through the entire apartment building. The 2 golden doodles, energized by the sudden light and the scent of their owner, practically exploded out of the silk-lined interior. They didn't just jump out. They launched themselves onto the white shag rug Sarah had just bought, their paws slightly damp from the puppy pads, leaving dark, muddy-looking prints everywhere. One of the dogs immediately lunged for a plate of expensive hors d'oeuvres on the coffee table, sending a bottle of red wine crashing onto the floor. But the dogs weren't the main event. It was the note. It was taped to the inside of the lid in a large, bold font so that the camera could see it clearly. It read, "Dear Sarah, we noticed you accidentally dropped your most precious belongings in our trunk. Since you already blocked our numbers, we assumed you wanted them shipped in A style befitting your taste. P.S. The box is rented. Please have it ready for pickup tomorrow, or the rental fee will be charged to your savings account." Sarah didn't just scream, she let out a guttural, soul-crushing wail of pure embarrassment. Her friends weren't admiring her anymore, they were stifling laughs, and some were even recording the wine-soaked chaos for their own stories. Her elite social had turned into a zoo in under 30 seconds. She scrambled to turn off the live stream, but it was too late. The queen of luxury had just been outplayed by a man with a cardboard box-sized sense of justice. The fallout was even more glorious than the initial reveal. Within an hour, the recording of Sarah's luxury unboxing had been shared across our entire extended family's group chat. The same people she had tried to manipulate for years were now watching her get a taste of her own medicine. Her friends, the ones she tried so hard to impress, didn't stick around to help her clean the red wine out of her white rug. They left as soon as the dogs started jumping on them, leaving Sarah alone with two hyperactive pets and a very expensive-looking empty box. The next morning, the white-glove delivery service showed up to reclaim the velvet trunk, just like Dad said. Sarah tried to refuse, but since Dad had actually rented the display piece under her name, using a family emergency clause she'd once used on him, she was forced to hand it over or face a $5,000 replacement fee. She tried to call my parents, screaming into the voicemail about how cruel and abusive it was to ship animals, completely ignoring the fact that she had stuffed them into a dark car trunk first. My dad never replied. He didn't need to. He simply sent one final text once he knew she had seen the bills. "The dogs are home. The lesson is learned. Don't test the logistics manager again." He then blocked her for the rest of the year. For the first time in a decade, our New Year's celebration was peaceful. No barking, no fake drama, and definitely no Aunt Sarah. As for the dogs, Sarah ended up having to hire a professional trainer because the video of her neglect went semi-viral in her social circle, and she was terrified of looking bad. So, in a weird way, Dad's revenge actually made the dogs' lives better too. But the best part of the whole thing? Whenever Sarah tries to start drama at family weddings now, someone inevitably whispers, "Hey Sarah, is there a gift box waiting for you outside?" And she shuts up instantly. So, the next time someone tries to dump their problems on you, remember my dad. You don't have to scream, and you don't have to be mean. You just have to be creative. Sometimes, the best way to handle a toxic person is to wrap their own nonsense in a gold bow and ship it right back to them. What would you have done in my dad's shoes? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.